Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Sample Chapter listeners, and welcome to episode 295 of the show. Hey, welcome back. I'm so happy to be here again, and I'm grateful that you've come back for the follow-up episode with last week's guest, Bradyn Harrison. Had a great conversation with Braydn in episode 294. Wonderful interview. Talked about a whole lot of stuff throughout the interview. Talking about cryptids and Ogopogo and his writing background and so much more. There's lots of fun stuff in there. One of the other things we talked about in there that I didn't get to mention, if you haven't heard it yet, but how many stories are in his anthology, how many short stories he included, and why he did that. And I thought that was an interesting take. So if you want to find out more about that, I'm going to make sure to include the the link to last week's episode in the show notes, so you can just click that, go check it out, and then come back to this so that you can hear this reading from Braydn and Sinister Scrawlings. And it's a great reading. It's a attention-filled reading full of mystery and dread that builds to a fascinating climax. I think you're going to really like it. It's coming up here in just a moment. First off, thank you for those of you who reached out, checking with me on my health, talking about my sexy gravelly voice I had last week, and it's still still a little bit there yet this week, but I'm feeling much better. I wound up needing to get some antibiotics. I had walking pneumonia again. Developed that a couple years ago when I had a cold, and it just kind of stuck around for a couple months, and had to do the same thing, go through a round of antibiotics and until I could finally get that straightened out. But on the road to recovery now. I've been taking that medicine for about a week, and I feel so much better. It's just my voice, which is funny. Of course, part of that could be my age as well. Being in my mid 50s, I think guys' voices do tend to get a little more gravelly as we get older, because we're grumpy old men. But we'll see what happens. Maybe I can use this voice for some future readings of my own. I am interested in maybe doing some readings of some of my stories, so we'll see what happens. Maybe this is a good thing. You never know. As for my writing, I have been pretty busy. I completed my short story for the anthology I'm doing with the Writers of Warrensburg. This is a PG-13 horror story. It's a lot of fun. I really like this story. It's got my usual, tendencies that I like to do where, I like a little bit of fear, a little bit of suspense, and some build up. And yeah, it's a fun story. I can't wait to, well, I don't have a title for it, but I can't wait to share that with you. And then, of course, later in the year when it becomes available, we'll make sure and share that with you on the show. Now that I'm done with that, or yeah, now that I'm done with that, I'm looking forward to getting back to, of course, my Bandit Chronicles prequel, and then also my Dire Wolf story that I've been working on. Both of those have been on my mind a lot lately as I finish things up, and I think that's something. Having finished this other short story, I think it really helps fuel the uh, the drive to want to go and do some other writing. And I'm certainly feeling that lately, to want to go and keep writing and get those other stories done. I'm looking forward to getting them done sooner than later, so that way they can be available and then move on from there to whatever's the next one. But that's my writing report. Make sure and share more with you as it comes along. One more thing before I go, I did want to mention one other podcast I've been listening to. They took a little hiatus as well throughout the holidays and just came back. It's one that I enjoy. It's the Post Mortem Report, hosted by Ronald McElroy and Michael Schotter. Yeah, they've been on for a few years, and they're interesting. They talk about a whole slew of subjects. They're writers as well, But they'll come on, they'll talk about what they've been reading, what they've been listening to, what they've been playing or watching. They have it's a very organized kind of show as far as what these two authors are just conversing about during that time. And for whatever reason, early on in their show, one of the things they brought up was this show. Ironically, I came across the show when it debuted, so I've been following along from the beginning, and I'm not sure how they came along or came about my show, but I was happy to hear that. Oh, hey, look at there! I've got some other podcast friends out there, even though I've never actually reached out to them, but they're worth a listen. You guys ought to check them out. So I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes for that show. Meanwhile, how about we go ahead and hop on over to that thrilling sample reading from our guest, Bradyn Harrison, as he reads a sample story from Sinister Scrawlings.
Derelict, as written and narrated by Bradyn Harrison. Found in his new short story collection, Sinister Scrawlings. Terrifying tales to read in the dead of night. Enjoy. The moth flitted through the trees as dusk cast reddish and orange shades through the leaves and branches. Bright green bushes and silent pine trees stood tall against a chilly breeze. Above the mountains, the sun descended slowly. Clouds gathered as thunder and lightning flashed in the distance. Blue bolts struck the farthest mountain, illuminating the area. The breeze became howling gusts, shadows swirling with the storm like chariots to dark gods descending on the lands below. The moth quickened its pace. Its compound eyes and compact head swiveled left to right, looking for a safe refuge. Out in the open, even an unassuming insect would be enough food for flying things out in the dark. A clearing in the forest caught the butterfly's lookalike's attention, and it fluttered ahead. A rolling field of yellowed grass waved in the wind, waving like hundreds of tiny flags. Waving for what, though? Tombstones stood out, cracked and elderly, stenciled with engraved names forgotten to the relentless, consuming march of time. Bodies eaten by the things below lay in their shattered coffins, grimacing at their humiliating fates. The only thing it knew was its instincts pounding with an urge. The moth flapped its wings, compound eyes dead set on reaching its destination. The abode lay in shadows as the moon rose above it in a sinister orange. The former home was bathed in bloody hues, the old wood glinting in the light. It was as if this home was waiting for something. The room lay silent and brittle as the sun dipped below the horizon, the light of the day slowly fading into darkness. Shadows crept into the lifeless space, slithering across the floors and walls in black smudges. The wind howled through the window, shattered by branches that had come through on tumultuous stormy evenings of yore. Ripped painted pictures of innocent animals smiling and prancing through desecrated rainbows haunted the walls' visages. A smiling lion with rounded eyes and a big toothy grin raised a paw, where the appendage had been replaced by a red and brown smear. Bulging, dry, small chunks littered the wall, centering out the joyous faces of the others dancing around on the featureless green hill, just like it had always been when others came into the room. The edges of what was once pristine glass were coated in grayish-brown dirt and dust. Dead flies and spiders curled upwards as the shadows rushed in. If a person were sitting and observing the scene, they would see them consuming the insects from the inside out, as if wings and limbs would be torn like a predator feasting on a cadaver. That is, if anyone here got to see them dragged past the floor and into the belly, just like it had always been. All pieces of the scene fade away into the oncoming night. The framed pictures of paintings drawn by young innocent hands, a bride, pastel forms, two young children, a parent, lover, and friends. The rest of the walls were ruptured. Beams of wood and drywall splintered in jagged pieces, laying on the floor, like something broke through with rapacious, domineering will. In the fading rays, redder stains splotched the age-faint wood, and creaks in the old walls ached through the house, and shrilly floors settled repressively through the old abode. Beside the bed, The walls churn and flex. Outlines of serpentine things emerge briefly and sink into the woods as if they were but water. Unexplained ripples emanate through the walls. Crimson vein-like roots worm through them, splintering and cracking more in the impenetrable black that is the night, just like it had always been. A slimy gurgling rumbled through the house like the growl of some beast that had eaten for years, carrying on like a sound that dragged on ominously through it all into fading, uneasy quiet. The darkness thickened as if it were mist, plunging the house into a black hole in the jaw of something else entirely. Something that is waking up and is ready to have its dinner, all the while under its unassuming guise. In the center of the room, a twin bed sat silently in the quickening dark. A hissing sound rasped above in the attic. The ceiling bent and warped as a wet, slimy, squishing slime slashed through the quiet enclave. It shrieked through the property in a burst of ear-rending loudness, then faded into the night. The moon rose high into the sky as the quietness reigned again. It is not slumbering any more. The moths fluttered slowly through the broken entrance. The tiny beatings of wings swept through the air as they propelled their master into the empty house. It landed on the floor and folded its wings. It switched back and forth curiously. Its body swiveled cautiously as its compound eyes gazed upon what was in front. The walls and stairs rose like godly pillars reaching far up the precipice, cloaked in pitch darkness. What furniture remained in this space stood out like mountainous monuments constructed by the hands of a higher being carved out. Chairs, tables, fireplaces, and even what remained of bookshelves. Every curve, nook, and insignia carved even to the material spoke of intentions and machinations that the moths could only grasp an iota of. Strangely, there were only two entryways in the house. One led upstairs, the other to the kitchen, and a third one led to another case spiraling deep into the inkier blackness, a veritable hole of unease descending into the unseen. The moth looked up at it all, staring at these monuments as a human would at a mountain. The moonlight shone through holes in the walls, battered by hail and doorless entrances, casting dark shapes of everything lying still, or not. To the insect, it has just entered another realm where everything is not only bigger, but also more foreboding. Deep in its sentient recesses, its instincts tingled intensely through its legs and wings. The impulse to fly away flashed through its being for a moment, before fading away like a stain. The winged thing skittered across the floor briefly and turned its attention to the stairs. Its fuzzy antennae wiggled like movable telescopes, trying to pick up what it could, food, shelter, or otherwise. With an explosive leap, the moth flew up the staircase as the rails towered above it. Like the cliff face to a canyon, the moth flew through the chasm leading up to the upper floor in the dark. Further away from the light it went. The shadows came closer, constricting the sight of the diminutive creature. Where there was less illumination, the gargantuan space only seemed to expand. Fewer items were seen. Every beating of its wings pushed it forward into a quiet, empty abyss within the house. Then, utter darkness. All it could sense and feel in its feet and antenna was the haunting sound of the wind. The banshee-like sound whistled through the hallway and against its wings. The sound echoed down the halls, ricocheting until the house was all but an amphitheater. The gust screamed around the moth and the items, keeping company throughout the venture. It fluttered into the nearest room. The rectangular shape of the bed loomed in the faint light of the moon, the visage of its dark reflection casting from the room into the darkness of the hall. Besides the comfortable construct, a lone, cracked chair sat in the white light. The polish shone against the visible contrast surrounding and swallowing the object at its feet. An empty desk right by the bookcase stared towards the wall, covered by degraded blue, green, and yellow crayon markers along the wood and underside, along with conspicuous reddish globs smeared along the side. Throughout the room there was the present scent of something else. It was a smell that would burn the sinuses of anything with bones and roil the stomachs of even the most hardened survivor. Flies flew around the corner of the room, as if they were called looking to commune and to feed on something no longer with the life outside or indoors. The moth cautiously landed on the bed without a tap and rested, catching time to relax after its lengthy journey through the house. Its wings clasped together once more, and it began walking across the bed. There was no reason to move except to obey its instincts. And if they were alarmed, the color would have gone from green to bright amber. A minute of quiet rose and fell on the room. Short-lived tranquility in a viper's nest ready to erupt with chaos. The creature stopped suddenly. Its antennae wriggled with alertness, and its compound eye took in all the details above, below, and around it. The walls shifted, contorting, and bending together in a fleshy wave cresting around the space. The wood splintered. The creek suddenly split as a booming primordial shriek erupted around the room. Geysers of blackened fluids exploded, drenching everything in sight. The flat boards gave way to hundreds of open orifices, filled with long, bony, serrated points gnashing together maniacally. The teeth lined in rows of four, bottom and upper jaws, as they all screamed in a distorted blend of sentient wails and moaning roars. The cries of young voices cut into pieces, struggling men turning to ground alive, and women barely able to resist their nebulous fate rang through the house, now coming to life. In moments, the wood split into mangled reddish-black flesh that moved and slithered in and among itself, slits filled with bone-white meat. Renders lunged forward like adders in barely contained fury. Malformed honeycomb split flesh writhed in tendrils and flying everywhere. They slithered along the walls and the floor, undulating as if they were sea serpents smashing through the decks to pick sailors off of. The tentacles flung and flew around incoherently, a swarm held uncontrollably by no leader. Then suddenly they stopped in midair. They slowly looked towards the breath. An immense snorting filled the room. Hurricane-like gusts of air inwardly forced in reverse, tearing off paint and chunks from the wall. The paintings on the children's wall, entire heads of the happy animals, seamlessly were beheaded. The room was rendered into a skeleton just as it stopped. The tendrils spiraled then towards the thing lying on the bed that had flown in without a hint. The moth barely espied the fast-moving, sinewy blur jumping towards it as it buzzed and flew out of the complex. Panic flashed through its body, pumping its tiny wings to go as fast as it could. The moth sprang into action and flew away just as a tentacle flew and glancingly hit its abdomen. A tiny chunk of its body tore off and fell to the floor. It barely bounced once before intestine-shaped organs erupted out of the floor, snapped it up, and fighting amongst itself to eat it. The snake-shaped organs flew out of the room after the tiny life escaped the complex. Writhing mounds of dangling flesh were kept hidden by the shadows, rumbling through the house. A distorted aquiline shriek disrupted the midnight void and maniacally roared in the path of the winged creature. The moth cleared the stairs as the tentacles squirmed after it, smashing through walls as if they were glass. The shrieking now resounded out of the depths of the house, the interior a hellish stage for the sounds of the tormented. From the surrounding ceiling, smaller writhing tentacles exploded out of the wallpaper. They snapped like human jaws, filled with piranha teeth, stained with bloody red as they slithered towards the prey. The entrance came into blurred view, the walls and stairs only a speedy haze in the eyes of the moth. The light of the moon hit its face, and cold air blasted onto its body. It pumped its wings harder, blood pumping through its shelled body as it finally cleared the entrance to... A piercing sensation stuck through its thorax and penetrated its back. The moth thrashed in the air silently, a fish out of water who had no lungs but must scream, its legs trying to cling onto something to get away. And then everything had fun of it. The trees, the moon, the plants, the wind, the grasses, the light towards a small town in the far distance. Everything suddenly shot further away from it. The interior dragged the moth into its depths, and up the stairs in only moments. Its body limp, the life fading from its eyes. The scene faded into blackness as the tentacles in the ceiling pulled it up towards a big circular mouth filled with thousands of teeth. It never felt the gnashing of the teeth, the screams that rang through the house, the silence that followed the night, or the myriad of husks and battered skeletons stashed away in the attic within the confines of this terrible monument. The moth never felt a thing, only the darkness that had come in to claim it. The night became silent once again. The derelict stood once more, shadowed by the moon and the night as it waited once again, just like it had always done.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen. That was Bradyn Harrison reading a sample story from his anthology, Sinister Scrawlings. That was thrilling. It was really kind of had me on the edge of my seat waiting to see what was going to happen next, and I cannot wait to dive into the rest of the book. I know you will too, so make sure you click that link in the show notes for the book and for more about Braydn. And you can hit that link also for last week's episode to check out his interview. Hey, while you're at it, don't forget to also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next time when I'm back with a new book, a new author, and a brand new sample chapter. Take care, everybody.